Hello and welcome to the third video review from wolfmanbytes.com. I'm Wolfman611 and today we'll be looking at the Logitech G5 laser mouse. First up, a couple things about this mouse. There's actually two different versions of this mouse on the market. There's the older G5 mouse that has a different look to it than this one here. It's actually a different paint scheme. The other differences between the two mice are that the old one only has 8 mouse buttons, and this new one that you're looking at here now has 9. The difference being that the new one here, you can see it here, tip this over, has an extra thumb button. And the old G5 doesn't have that. Other than that, the other big difference is that with this mouse here, it can do 1,000 reports a second off the USB port, where the older one could only do 500 reports a second. Next up, I want to get into the mouse buttons. This mouse here has 9 mouse buttons. And as you can see, when I tilt it over, you start out with your 2 thumb buttons. You've also got your right, left click buttons. You got the 2 sensitivity buttons that can go up or down. You can also tilt the scroll wheel left and right, and also push it down. All that gives you a combination of 9 buttons, all fully programmable inside the mouse driver as well. Now, while on the topic of the mouse buttons, the biggest complaint I have with these 2 thumb buttons here, line this up for the camera, is that both are basically on the same level. And where this presents a problem is if you're playing a game and you turn around and you try to use the 1 thumb button, like right there you can see my finger on it. If I try to push this button down with my thumb, sometimes I also hit this second button as well, one behind it. And so that's a bit of a problem. What they should have done was when they built this mouse, they should have taken this little button here and moved it down to here. If they had done that, if they had to offset the 2 buttons, there wouldn't be any issues at all in terms of them 2 thumb buttons. Other than that though, the buttons on the mouse are fine. Like the Microsoft Abu mouse, it's also good to have these 2 sensitivity buttons here, where you can adjust the sensitivity of the mouse if you're playing a first-person shooter. You can do this on the fly. You don't even need the mouse driver installed to do this. Without the mouse driver, you have 3 sensitivity settings that are set in the mouse by default. With the driver, you can have up to 5 sensitivity settings and go in there and change each one of the 5 to whatever you want it to be. Also, here on the mouse, this black part is it's a LED display. There's a little light that goes up and down in here, depending on where you have the sensitivity button set. And that by default has 3 lights, but you can have 5 sensitivity settings, as I stated before, with the mouse. So what happens is, once this mouse is lit up, you'll see that when you only have 3 sensitivity settings, you basically got 3 different positions for the light, one down here in the middle, and then one up top. When you have 5 sensitivity settings with the mouse, when you hit the first one, you get the 1 light to come on, and then when you hit the second one, 2 lights come on. And then when you hit the third one, only the second light comes on the mouse. And this continues so on and so forth until you get all 5 settings, until you can actually go through all 5 of the sensitivity settings. Now, the other big thing with this mouse that I've never seen with any other mouse, when I flip it over here on the underside, there's a button you can press here. And when you push that button, this little tray can slide out now. Move the mouse out of the way. As you can see, this tray contains 8 different weights. Now when you buy the mouse, you get this container here, this G5 container, and inside it, you get up to 16 weights. You got various weights here. You got 1.7 grams per weight, all the way up to 4.5 grams. So between the 2 and the 16 weights, you can actually mix and match what weights you want to have in this little tray here. And so what that does is it gives you a little bit of an option in terms of how heavy you want the mouse to feel. Maybe you want one side of the mouse a little heavier than the other side. Whatever you want to do, basically you can do it with these weights you got. Now what I did is I took, me being me, I took all the heavy weights and stuck all the heavy weights in the tray, and for me that's good enough. The mouse feels nice and solid and heavy, and that's the way I like it. So that's the other thing that's a bit different about this mouse that you normally don't see in other mice. And to get it back in, you just take see the arrow there? Take the mouse, slide it in, and she clicks into place. Now also, like the Microsoft Abu mouse, you also have these special fancy feet they have here. And these feet make it so that essentially there's hardly any friction at all when you're sliding this thing around a mouse pad, and it's also fairly quiet too. Now, the one thing I should mention is that the driver software that comes with this mouse isn't as sophisticated as the driver software for the Microsoft Abu mouse. The biggest thing I can see with this mouse here, or the biggest default to the mouse driver that comes with this mouse, is the fact that with this mouse driver there's no macro ability at all. So due to the fact you don't have any macro abilities, the best you're going to do with this mouse is that if you want to make it so that one of the mice buttons emulates a keyboard key, that's about that's as best you're going to get. You can't have, say for example, the sensitivity buttons or any of the other buttons, when you hit them, have them trigger multiple keys on the keyboard. That doesn't happen. You can trigger one key on the keyboard per mouse button, and that's as best you're going to get. Which, for some people, that's not really that big a deal, and they'll be perfectly happy with that. Other people, though, will want to have the macro ability, and they're not going to be too happy with this limited software implementation I have with the driver. Also, like the other mice you get on the market today, this one here has got a 2000 dpi laser sensor in it. And so this thing, just like the Microsoft mouse, you can have it so that either a little bit of movement equals a lot in terms of the actual mouse pointer on the screen, or have it the other way around. You can have it so that you got to move the mouse all over the place just to get a little bit of mouse movement on the screen. Again, the choice is up to you. And also in the driver, you can fully program that as well. I mean, if you want to have it so that the sensor isn't so sensitive, you can back it off in there, as well as doing the same thing with these sensitivity buttons up here. Now, like with the Abu mouse, I like to leave these sensitivity buttons just the way they are, even though you can fully program these, and you can fully program every mouse button on the actual mouse. I like to leave these ones set to do their default mouse sensitivity functions. That way when you're inside a first-person shooter or whatever, you can always adjust your sensitivity. So that's the way you want to have that. Now, the only other major complaint that I have with the mouse is that in some games, the buttons ain't recognized by default. For example, the tilt wheel. When you tilt this thing left and right, you basically have two extra buttons. And in the 3 games I tried, which were Counter-Strike Source, Battlefield 2142, and I think Bioshock was the other one, none of their configuration parts of their games would recognize these two buttons. And also, I think you probably get the same thing with the sensitivity buttons. I like to leave them as sensitivity buttons, so I never actually tried to program those inside a game, but I know for a fact that the tilt wheel wasn't recognized at all. And sometimes one of the thumb buttons wasn't recognized either. That's a bit of a drag, because I mean, now what you got to do is you got to turn around. If you want to use all the mouse buttons on the mouse, you got to go and set up a mouse profile for every game. Whereas if the game was just built to recognize the 9 buttons that are there, it'd be a lot easier to deal with it. You know, you'd go into the game, go into the configuration settings, set the mouse up the way you want, and you're finished. None of this stuff where you got to go make a profile. But having said that, even though some games don't recognize the buttons, you can still go into the mouse software, set up a profile, and have the keys do whatever you want in terms of keyboard keys. So it's basically, there is a way around it, even though it's a bit sloppy, and I'd rather see the software support the buttons the way they're supposed to. That's the only real downside to this mouse that I see. In conclusion, this isn't a bad mouse at all. At the time of this review, you could purchase the Logitech G5 laser mouse for around $60 US. To see a detailed text review of the Logitech G5 laser mouse, please visit my website. If you have any comments or questions about the reviews, please visit the forums on the website and let me know what's on your mind. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this is Wolfman611 signing out.